Welcome to this episode of Clinically Pressed. We are on with Rusty Murphy, who is the founder of Rising Athletes, a nonprofit in the La Crosse, Wisconsin area that focuses on getting resources to athletes that otherwise may not have them. That could include fees to participate. It could include equipment. They've done some amazing things locally, and I know they're definitely looking to expand to just give underprivileged athletes a chance to do what they want to do with what they need to get that done. I've known Rusty for years, was his athletic trainer through his college football career, and so we talk about rising athletes and also just a little bit of his experience coming through and what he learned and thinks is important for other up-and-coming athletes to know, and things that maybe he wished he would have known back then, or really things that he has no regrets for because he dove all in and really bought into what was going on. So great episode. It was fun to catch up with him. We've got some things planned in the future to work together, so stay tuned for that. If you're an athletic trainer and like the idea of journaling, check out the Athletic Training Daily Journal. Even if you're not an athletic trainer, if you're in healthcare, in a leadership position, it could be beneficial to you. Yes, it's geared towards athletic training, but really you could interchange almost anything if we refer to athletic training in it. 50% of proceeds go directly to donations, the other 50% just to fund Clinically Pressed Co. to help get things going up and running. We got some things in the works for 2024, but without further ado, please enjoy this episode. Well, welcome to this episode of Clinically Pressed. We are on with Rusty Murphy, who is the founder, started up the nonprofit Rising Athletes, which is based out of, well, it started in La Crosse, Wisconsin area. I think it's still based out of there, even though Rusty's moved to a different part of the state, but kind of now addressing the entire state. I knew Rusty back when he played football at UW-La Crosse, and I worked there. We didn't spend too much time together. Other than being on the field, a couple of things came up and that we worked our way through. But saw that he started this up. We've been touching base with them just with some of the work we've been doing. Hopefully some more partnership stuff coming through in the future. But I wanted to have him on to just talk about what Rising Athletes is and what they do. And then we're going to get a little bit into just kind of the process of athletics and, kind of Rusty's story of, high school to deciding to play at a Division III school. And then kind of even that process there, which, we both had experience with because we were there, but from two very different sides. And not to make him feel too special, Rusty was one that bought in a lot to what we were selling to the team, and that was a huge benefit to us to have him buy in, and hopefully it also benefited him and his experience as well. So first, I'll just turn it over to you if you want to just talk about Rising Athletes and kind of summarize it, and then we'll jump into it from there.
Yeah, for sure. So it was me and Katie Lieber is her name. She's a mom in the La Crosse area. 3 boys, I believe. They go to La Crosse Logan High School. So me and her connected back in the summer fall of 2020 during all of the fun COVID pandemic stuff. Everything was closed down. Not a ton of La Crosse's football field was closed during the day. Not a lot of places to train, stuff like that. And I had been noticing kind of trends, online. I saw that going to Logan High School or Central to use their field, and high school guys were working out too on the field. So, kind of met up with a few of them and just saw some inconsistencies with people having access to certain whether it was equipment or cleats, that was like the example I had. I saw a kid didn't have a pair of cleats who was like going into his junior year of high school, and did some research and was like, there's probably a pretty big gap being created now, especially with COVID, and you know, sports were getting, seasons were getting canceled left and right. You assume resources that were going to those sports were no longer, or at least paused for the time being. Not as much help from the school districts. So I had this idea to start a company or an organization. And Katie, I had met Katie through the principal and athletic director of Logan High School at the time. They told me she had a similar idea. So we connected and created what now is Rising Athletes, with really just kind of an idea to help as much as we could. Didn't really know how, didn't know didn't know how to necessarily get funding. Didn't know how to. I mean, we went through the whole process of setting up, which you now know, Joel, like the 501c3,
Such a
and that
good
fun
time.
process. Oh yeah, very very fun portion. So we learned all that together. Set up all the all the fun state requirements, all that stuff, and we launched. And 99% of our funding is usually crowd funded from parents, citizens of the La Crosse area, people that support us online. A couple of companies have reached out, and given us a check here and there, which is really helpful. But yeah, like totally crowd funded. We don't have huge checks from corporations or anything like that, so it's kind of a real tight knit community group that helps us. And our sweet spot in terms of helping has been kind of the little stuff that you don't really think about, from an outsider's perspective, but just the little fees and little things that kind of add up when you have a student going through multi sports or clubs, stuff like that. When you go to like for example, like powerlifting events, there's usually like some sort of fee for each person to participate. Sometimes it's $10, sometimes it's 100. It is what it is, but sometimes that stuff can add up for families and kids and parents. So we've really hit a sweet spot of kind of fulfilling those things through the crowdfunding, and getting that to those who are in need. We have a pretty easy setup. You can just go to our website, click on, fill out our form. If you're looking for assistance on something. So overall, it's a pretty easy process. Me being kind of away from La Crosse right now, I have to give props to Katie and the rest of the Rising Athletes team. They've done a lot since I've been gone. Really just making sure when these things come through to us that we can reach out and get them, fulfilled, get them paid for, whatever it is, whether it's cleats or, a random fee or whatnot. So, yeah, it was overall like a really good learning experience for me. It's really cool to see, a community kind of help each other in a way, because really we're just kind of the intermediary between, where the funds go. But yeah, it's really cool.
That's awesome. Yeah, I remember seeing it when it popped up, and I was like, wow, a guy who's still in school figuring out how to do all this. And I don't want to make the 501c3 thing sound too scary. I probably made it out to be a little bit bigger deal than it needed to be, because just the way they make it sound when you submit that, like if you mess something up, it could delay you by 2 months.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good resources out there, and I would happily share anything with anybody who's trying to do it to work through that form 1023.
Yeah, it's a long one.
Beast, but it's doable.
Yeah, it's worth it too. I mean, the United States government does help out nonprofits a lot with taxation and other things, so it is good to get it done. But yeah, I mean, it was a really cool. Like you said, I was still in college. I mean, I really had nothing to do. I was sitting on my hands, not having any, summer football or anything like that. So it was, yeah, it was really cool, and really proud of what we've done and what we're going to continue to do. And, stuff like this, partnerships like this will only continue to grow. So yeah, it's awesome.
Kind of the second big thing, a conversation that we want to have that ties into some of this, and hopefully, some future things that we're hoping to work on, is, could you talk about your origin story, just in high school, single sport athlete, multi-sport athlete, if I remember correctly, were being recruited to go, if you will, to bigger, quote, places or potential scholarship money of some sort. If I think I vaguely remember that, ultimately ended up coming to UW-La Crosse Division III, which for people listening, if you aren't familiar with Division III, there are no athletic scholarships that are given out. If you go, depending on the school you go to, you might get other versions of scholarships,
Yeah.
academic or otherwise to offset. But there, you don't get, there's no money to play sports. And in a lot of cases, you actually are probably paying some sort of money to play sports at the Division III level. So if you don't mind kind of talking about that and kind of your experience there.
Yeah. So in high school, I was a three-sport athlete. I played football in the fall, I played basketball in the winter, and I played baseball in the summer. So that was kind of my, around the clock. I had something going on, all time of year. Um, I also kind of dipped my toes into powerlifting 2 years in high school. It was mostly because I was lifting with the same people anyway, and the coach, I would just kind of get thrown into meets. So I only wore a squat suit, I think, a couple times, but it kind of just was like a fun thing to compete for,
Sure.
with the off-season lifting I was already doing. So yeah, so I played mostly three sports, and was busy all year round. When it came to recruiting, I really wanted to play baseball out of college, or out of high school. I was, in my opinion, I was a better, at the time anyway, I was a better baseball player than I was a football player. But I had the body for football. Baseball guys are a little more, a little lankier. You don't do as much, bench press and stuff like that when you're when you're trying to throw a ball really fast and stuff like that. So um, I ended up getting recruited heavily for football my senior year. I had a couple of different Division II schools early on. Northwest Missouri State being one of them, St. Cloud State.
Mm-hmm.
Looking back, which is a good thing. good thing.
Yes.
You never know. And then a lot of the D3s in Wisconsin, La Crosse being one, obviously, Whitewater, a couple of the private ones, Carroll College, those kind of ones. Um, so it was kind of a long, drawn out process, especially when you get into Division II and those scholarships, because they only have a very set amount. It's not like Division I where most guys are on scholarship. It's, guys get half scholarships, they get quarter scholarships. So there's a lot of math that has to get done that people kind of forget about in terms
Yes.
of just like getting a scholarship, which is kind of a misconception. When you hear you're a scholarship athlete, that's not always. I mean, it's true, but they might be paying for $2,000 a semester, and you're
Yeah, it
still
doesn't
paying
mean
out of
full
pocket.
ride.
Yeah, exactly. So I was kind of holding on and waiting to see if there was any scholarship money that came. It never really did. A couple of like at Northwest Missouri State, they wanted me to, preferred walk on, or whatever they called it. Long ways away from where I lived in Milwaukee. Is basically a plane ride. You could drive it, but it'd be pretty long. So that didn't really interest me too much. Didn't really love some of the other schools in terms of like the campus and the school, like the actual what I was going to go to school for. And then I went to La Crosse, and campus kind of blew me away. They had what I wanted to do in school. Very reputable on all sides. So I ended up deciding to go there. And yeah, that's kind of where where me and you ended up linking up in the part of the story.
Remind me, because it all blends together. Was that Coach Schmidt's first year?
So it was his second year.
Second
So
year?
his first full year would have been my. So I was his first. I was a part of his first recruiting class, if that
Okay.
makes sense.
So had he
Because
coached a
I
full
believe
year
he
before
came
you
in
came?
this.
Or
What
are
did you
you
say?
talking like, so he was in the spring when he got hired. Did you start
Yeah.
that fall?
No, the next fall.
The
So
next
the
fall?
fall
Okay.
of the fall of 2017 was when I got there.
Gotcha.
So yeah, because he got there in spring, and then 2016 they went, I think, 5-5,
Yep.
and then the 8-2 year was my first year.
Gotcha.
So yeah, I mean, you want to talk about like people go picking schools based on being really good, or having a a really good reputation of winning. I mean, La Crosse was on not the greatest streak. He got there, they got to 5-5. Me and a couple of other guys my age, we always talk like we committed to La Crosse at sub winning, and when we got there, it was even 5-5. And then to do what we did was pretty cool thinking back. The best season they had in a while was 5-5. So
For sure.
so yeah.
So part of that, and this is going to sound self-serving to myself, but that's okay. Is just in that whole process, there was a lot of change that was happening. When Coach Schmidt came in, just with the assistants and trying to get those all ironed out, and strength and conditioning switched over with some changes in that area as well. And in that process, a new, nothing drastic, but a different style of training was implemented, and we had some older players that really bought into it. That was really helpful. I think of the Noah Rishes of the world and Ryan Weber's that just really bought into what Dr. Glenn Wright was selling, which wasn't just lifting to lift. There was always a purpose, and it was training to train. They weren't workouts. It was all part of a plan, and focused on more than just getting big and strong. And part of that, what we were selling, and I'll speak to it from mine, we saw a huge decrease in injuries, just some soft tissue stuff, because we were focusing on mobility and some other movement things. But if you don't mind kind of talking about, like, you came in and you didn't know any different because you probably were a freshman, so it was just do as I'm told is kind of a thing. But, really buying into that over the course of time, and trying to figure out or understand that if some is good, more isn't always better. And it's easy for me to say, but it can be really hard from the athlete side, which I get that, you want to be the hardest worker, you want to outwork the other guy. And we would always try and counteract that with, it's about working smarter and not just harder and more. If you wouldn't mind talking about kind of your experience or your thoughts, or, on everything there, because in the world of TikTok training and everything, I think some of that nuance gets lost.
Yeah. So it's kind of funny. I remember first, the summer of, before I went to fall camp, I got the, the freshman, first block or whatnot leading up to fall camp. And I had never seen like half of it, besides bench press, 10X. That was like the only one I knew. So I remember being in the gym and, like watching YouTube videos as I warmed up the whole time. So it was a whole new world to me. Like you said, it was kind of a little bit of, I didn't know what I didn't know, which was kind of a good thing in my opinion, because, I had just assumed that every college, did that. It wasn't like a, because, I knew in high school that, we just lifted the lift. You did your bench, your RDLs, your squats, power cleans, whatnot. And then everything else besides those 4 or 5 main lifts was just, basically trying to body build, right? Curls, triceps, calf raises, hamstrings. Yeah, exactly. And it wasn't all functional, and it did fine for 15 to 17-year-olds in the gym, whatever. But when I got there, having those guys, like Norish, like you said, some of those 2017 grads that had bought in, it made it easier for me to just assume that this was the way it was and this is how we should do it. And I also knew in the back of my head that, my experience was minuscule compared to, a Dr. Wright of the world, or a, Joe Lukey of the world. Like I had done zero research besides Muscle and Fitness magazine, so, yeah. So that was, I knew it was different. But, even after the first couple of months of doing it, with preseason and during season, you could feel a difference, just in the way I was moving. I was moving better. everything was very organized and prepared. Like even the warm-ups were, it wasn't just going through the motions of like jogging and jumping jacks and stretching. Like it was very tailored to the lift you were about to do. Which I had never, we had the same in high school. You had the same set of warm-ups, right? You jog back and forth, you skip, whatever, and then you go lift, whatever. You're doing the same warm-up for the same. Doesn't matter what the lift is. So that was really interesting to me, just seeing that and be like, oh, this all makes sense. But I think where it really clicked was my first and second off season where I had the most high trajectory of training, in terms of being more mobile, more just didn't hurt as much. You weren't as sore after lifts, and you realize that's not a terrible thing. Like sure, sometimes you should be sore if you do really hard work, but like you shouldn't necessarily be sore after every single lift you do in the off season, preparing for the next year. Which is just something that was drilled into you, when you're in high school or you're growing up. Like you didn't have a good lift unless you were sore, but
Right.
you find out that's not always the case. And in fact, sometimes it's not good, especially if you're in season and you have a game, 2 days from now, so it was a really big learning experience for me. But at the end of the day, like, I mean, I don't know. I still do Dr. Wright's lifts to this day, in the warm-ups and stuff to stay mobile. So it's something that obviously worked for me. And, I think another thing on this is like you talked about the buy-in. Nobody on earth has the perfect weight plan. Like everybody could argue left and right about who has the perfect, plan to prepare for a football season. But having a guy like Dr. Wright and you behind the scenes crafting this thing with a lot of research going into it, a lot of stuff on the back end that 18 to 24-year-olds don't have the bandwidth to do. Just being able to have a group of guys come together and do it, kind of no matter what, and just buy in. It not only helps get everyone's body on the same page, but that translates to playing football better together. If you're having to do the same tasks in the off season, doing the same tasks during the season, it's even easier. So yeah, no, I got no complaints on on the new wave of workouts. It's kind of funny too. When I was in high school, I would follow bodybuilders or whatever on social media, and by the time I got to my junior and senior year, the same people I was following, they were all of a sudden starting to incorporate mobility into their workouts and and offload days and stuff like that. So it's almost like we were ahead of the curve there. So it was stuff like that. It's cool to see.
One other thing I wanted to get kind of your perspective on, because we got to see it quite a bit. People would come in as freshmen, maybe a little undersized, whatever it may be. Maybe not the best football player, but then just over the course of the years, evolved into whatever it is. One that just immediately comes to mind is Cole Speaker, who literally just showed up at camp. Nobody wasn't actively recruited, and now he's playing professional football in Canada, and was just doing incredible things towards the end of his career at UW-La Crosse. What was your experience of just seeing that, or feeling that evolution, and just even the patience that it took to know that was coming? I don't remember specifically, so I apologize in advance, how much you played when you were, freshman, sophomore, versus obviously you were captain, starting, linebacker towards the end of your career. But obviously we had other people that you probably saw evolve too, that you came in and they may have been scout team, and is this guy ever going to see the field? And then come the end of their career, they're contributing in a huge way.
Yeah, no, I mean, big thing off the bat is, we talked about this before we started, but like, especially now with, with the portal and, med reds and whatnot, you've got it's not necessarily uncommon to have 24 and 25-year-olds on the football field these days in college. And you've got 18-year-olds coming in out of high school. Like simple math will tell you there's just no way they could catch up to be able to start in a meaningful way their freshman year. And sometimes there's obviously some cases where guys can and guys will, just based on their athletic abilities. Some people have, God-given talent, but assuming you're going to go in and make a meaningful difference as a full-on starter, learning a new offense, a new defense that, in high school you usually didn't have anywhere near, the complexity of either of those schemes is just kind of unrealistic. So if I had any advice, it'd be to just show up your freshman year and just soak everything up like a sponge. And when you do get a chance to make a real difference, I mean, my freshman year, I got to start on kickoff and punt and all that stuff. And I knew I really wasn't going to probably see the field on defense. So I just bought into doing everything I could right on those two teams to make a difference. I've blocked a kick or two my freshman year with Cole. One of them was with Cole Speaker.
Nice.
Got tackles on kickoff. So just making a difference where I could was a big deal. And other guys did the same thing. I mean, a guy that comes to mind for me is like Jake Simonchek. I mean, we all know what he did his last 2 years, but his freshman year, he didn't see the field at all. I mean, he was on scout team. He didn't even see it on. He wasn't a punt returner yet. I don't think he started returning punts until his sophomore year. So yeah, like you've got all American guys that show up as 18-year-olds to a college program, and yeah, they're not starting every single down and making huge, meaningful plays, but that's just kind of where your roots start to grow. I mean, you could put athletics aside and, you've got 18-year-olds that have never not been away from home, for an extended period of time. There's a lot of stuff changing. You have to actually try in school. You can't just, bypass, like you maybe did in high school. There's stuff like that. So, but yeah, I mean, I think a big thing you see is just consistency throughout the years. Like, the guys I worked out with all 4 years, like in the summers and stuff like that, like you knew they were going to eventually play. It was just a matter of time. And, what shape or form, you never really know. I mean, depending on luck, schemes, if are there 8 guys that are a year older than you and you just got unlucky, like you can't predict that stuff. But like Cole Speaker, Jake Simonchek, like all those guys that come to mind, like they were all there in the summers. They all worked out all the time. They worked really hard and they really tried to follow the program, whether it was off season or in season or spring ball or whatnot, to a T. Did it mean they were lifting the most and putting out the biggest numbers? Probably not. But that's and that that was one thing it really wasn't about. Like just because your max wasn't the biggest, like how can we make you as athletic as possible? And I don't love the word athletic because I think it's overused. Because you can't. I mean, how do you measure a 350-pound guy that can run a sub 540 to a Tyreek Hill of the world, that or those guys that are small but run, sub 4.540. So, but
Right.
but making, no matter where you are on that scale, are you a really fast, outside guy, back end guy, or are you a really big interior guy? Like, how can you be as athletic as possible? And that usually happens, over a course of those 4 years. So when you get to junior and senior year, you're a really good athlete. And that changes too, depending on, I've seen guys go from linebacker to D line. I've seen guys go from linebacker to D back, just because I lived on the defensive side of the ball. So as that plan develops, right, you're going to see guys get almost too athletic or too big or whatever. So they got to shift, but it's not a bad thing because that maybe they find their starting role there. So
Absolutely.
there's a lot of those things that can happen. It's very complex. It's it's not just a simple science like social media wants to tell you.
I think that's a really good point that you brought up, as well as, one thing we always tried to focus on from the strength and conditioning side and everything was, our goal wasn't necessarily to make you a better football player, but our goal was to give you as much robustness as an athlete. to then let that transfer over to the football field or any other sport. So yes,
Right.
there's sport in quotes, sport specific training. We probably wouldn't train you the same as if you were a baseball player as a football player, but a lot of the basic concepts stay the same. And that we just wanted to make you as robust as possible. So then when you went to your sport, you were then able to go and apply that, or to what the skills they were teaching you on. For us, we didn't do a lot of maxing out, maybe twice a year just to kind of get some
Right.
basic metrics. And we would go on a 5-rep max instead of a single and just do a conversion. But,
Yeah.
our general goal, because we didn't also max out on a lot of things, but, squat 2 times your body weight, bench press 1.5, as those have been kind of loosely found to be, quote, strong enough. If we're getting you to that, do we get more benefit out of focusing on other things than adding 5 more pounds to your bench press? If we can
Right.
move weights faster to play into that power equation. So it's not always just about the one specific thing. I think that's an important thing to remember for people is, and myself, because just like you, I was Muscle and Fitness and Flex Magazine
Yeah.
plus bigger, stronger, faster, some version of that programming.
Yeah.
It was just straight linear periodization, which is fine, but I didn't know what
Yeah.
I was doing.
Right.
And wish I could go back and do it differently.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like you brought up a good point. Like we never maxed out 1 rep. Sometimes you did on accident if you went really high on what you think you could do 5 times, maybe. But stuff like that forces you, like you rarely do you see a high schooler doing 5 reps max, right? Sometimes again, you might accidentally find it somewhere, but being forced to carry weight for longer periods of time, I could tell was a lot different than just, crunched up really tight and trying to get a rep squat. Makes a big difference. But yeah, like you said too, I mean, like football is weird, when you're on the field and you're like for me personally, like, you're taking on, 350 pound, O lineman, right? So is, like you said, is adding 10 more pounds to the bench press better, or is, hey, how about you beat this guy with speed instead, and you don't really, you know what I mean? So there's that balancing act of sometimes, yeah, sure, like sometimes I needed to be, physical up front, sometimes I needed to be fast. And you find that a lot on the football field, like even with wideouts, like sometimes they have to block, sometimes they have to run really fast, to the other side of the field. So it's not just a science of bigger, faster, stronger anymore. Like we all know, it's there's a lot more involved in that thing. So yeah, we could go
Absolutely.
on for hours about the misconceptions of 17 and 18-year-olds and what they're
Which may
doing.
be a follow-up episode.
Yeah,
I think people submit some questions that we can hopefully work through.
yeah, no, for sure.
Anything else around your kind of journey through recruiting and kind of, through college that we didn't touch on before we hit you with a couple of the clinically pressed questions?
Um, I mean, I'm trying to think. I mean, the one thing I would say, recruiting wise, which again, misconceptions, I think the stat is like 1 in 13 high schoolers make it onto a college level team. I think that's for all sports. I think football specifically is pretty close. It's like 7% or something like that. So if you got a group of 50 guys, you can count on one hand, how many guys are going to be at the college level. So just getting to that point of making the step and having, people that want you to play on their team is pretty cool. And it doesn't really matter what level, um, to me, especially, I could talk about this for a long time, but like, we went to Grand Valley State and played them, my senior year of college, which is Division II school, very good Division II school. I think they were in the semifinals of the Division II playoffs this year. So you get into the weird, lower level D2s, higher level D3s. I mean, this year La Crosse just went and beat Northern Michigan, which is technically a Division II school. So I think the Division II, Division III thing is, I don't know, kind of overworked, a technicality of not being able to get athletic scholarships and stuff like that. So, the biggest thing I would say to athletes is, the biggest thing that drew me to lacrosse was my mom forced me to think about the 8 months I wasn't going to be on the football field, right? you're playing football, usually August to November, if you're lucky enough, December. The rest of the year, you're still living there and going to school. So
That's
finding
fair.
a place that you're able to, be happy and, be content with there all year round is pretty important. And, in my opinion, more important than, getting a half scholarship to a slightly bigger school, or maybe not even a bigger school, but a different division.
Right.
So yeah, I guess that would be for recruiting. At college, we talked about buying into the weights, also buying into whatever the scheme on the field is, just as much as you buy into the scheme off the field. But yeah, other than that, I'm sure we'll have some sub episodes after this talking about some of the nitty gritty details and some of that stuff. But yeah, that's good.
Perfect. You may have kind of already answered this, and I think you actually used the words earlier, but I'll cue it up to you again. What advice would you go back and give yourself as a younger athlete? Could be about anything, and just if you could set when you would go back to tell yourself that.
Yeah, so I think I'd probably go back to I think that's 15, 16-year-old self. Whenever I was a sophomore in high school, I took a year off of basketball. I didn't play basketball my junior year, in hopes to train really hard for baseball and attempt to get a scholarship for baseball. Giving more time to a sport to try and advance to the next level. I tell every high school kid I meet about this, because a big thing these days is specializing in sports, and I would highly not recommend it at all. Like we talked about before, being an athlete is much more important than being good at your sport, in my opinion, especially because the high school level is just different than the college level, no matter where you go. So when you get to college, like, you can be morphed into a really good college football player, baseball player, whatnot. If you're looking at colleges, you probably have the general talent to make it there. But I think if I would have stayed in basketball my junior year, I might have gotten a little bit more. I always got a lot of conditioning out of basketball. I got a lot of footwork and stuff like that, which I missed out on that year. So who knows what would have happened on the football field, stuff like that. So my advice would be to play as many sports as you can. Just do stuff you enjoy and not make it because of trying to make the next level. And I say that because I didn't end up even going to play college baseball, which makes it kind of funnier. So
For sure.
you can use me as your as the guinea pig. It doesn't work. Just be really athletic.
Fair enough. What has been one of the most influential resources, or whatever you want to kind of highlight, that you found, within your athletic career, that you think people should be aware of?
So do you mean like person or place or thing, or
Any of the above.
okay?
You're choosing.
I'd probably say my coaches. I was blessed with really good coaches from when I was, playing Little League baseball all the way up through, my senior year on the football field. Coaches coach, especially high school sports, because they love it. And they're not getting paid a whole lot. Sometimes they get a stipend of $1,000 a year or whatever, but they're not getting paid a lot. They do it because they love the game. They want to help kids advance and be good at it, and hopefully, make the next level. Like, I remember my high school coaches told me that, they were proudest when I picked a college to go to school to, because it meant I was playing the sport that they were coaching me at, and I was going to get a higher education. So I would say all my coaches throughout. And then at college, I had a pretty lovely coaching staff. Coach Janice was my D coordinator the entire time I was there. And then my senior year, he took the leap to head coach, and now he's, 2-time WIAC coach of the year, and I think he got regional awards this year. So, yeah, just really lean on your coaches. They're there for a reason. Yeah, definitely my coaches for sure.
Fair enough. Always a good one. Last question. And again, kind of apply this where you want, but with our hashtag making the complicated simple, how is something that you have interacted with, whether it's with rising athletes or just in your, athletic career, taking something that's complicated, at least seemingly, how would you make that simple?
Yeah, I think, I don't know. I mean, for me, obviously football is my example. I think that people think that, I mean, it is. Football is complicated. It's a complicated sport. But the best way to get better at playing football, or best way to get better at football, is by playing football. So, the more you do it, the better you get. We didn't run much of a defense on, not much X's and O's in high school. I had a really good defensive coordinator who made it really simple for me. That was kind of, see ball, tackle ball. It was really helpful for me just to, taught me how to, read linemen and stuff like that, made that stuff simple. But people kind of I think, especially, kids coming out of high school get scared about knowing playbooks and stuff in college, and stuff like that. And, kind of football as a whole, when you talk about, it's overwhelming when you think about, a new scheme, offense or defense, weights that, you've never trained as diligently before, as focused on certain things, school and all that stuff. But you get better at it, as you go. So I guess, complicated is simple would be, it sounds very complicated, but the more you do it, the better you get at it. And it's not something you just like study more and know. It's something that you just learn over time. So I guess maybe the game of football in general, the more you do it, the simpler it gets.
Awesome. Well, this was great to catch up, relive a few of the glory days back in UW-La Crosse. Yeah, and then people stay tuned for some follow-ups in the future.
Yeah, we'll have to jam on some of the nutrition and weights and stuff like that.
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Joel. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Clinically Pressed. We really hope you enjoyed hearing from Rusty and what Rising Athletes is doing. This is another local nonprofit that we're really looking forward to doing some more things with. It's been really a lot of fun watching Rusty develop as a person, just knowing him all through his college career and seeing what he's doing now and the impact that he's having on athletes that may not have had the opportunities that others have. If you want to check them out, risingathletes.org, please do that. If you want to hear more, we are planning to do some follow-up episodes with Rusty, just talking about nutrition, answering some questions that really seem to get in the way of high school athletes, just not knowing, even speaking from personal experience, that things I wish I would have known back when I was going through it to really help make the most of it, and not just doing what we found in Muscle and Fitness and Flex magazine. So appreciate everyone checking out this episode, and we will talk to you with the next one.